Well, welcome everyone to Open Classroom, the Brown School's digital forum for community and conversation, and one of our activities of our professional development department. My name is Sarah Sims, and I am the manager of continuing education for the Brown School here at Washington University in St. Louis, and I'm very happy to have everybody here. I want to welcome and introduce my colleague and facilitator for today, Amber Brown. Amber, if you want to give a wave. She is our manager of career services, and she'll be moderating the question and answer portion at the end of the program today. So a few housekeeping items. This is a Zoom webinar format, which means that we can't see or hear you, but we still do want to engage with you via the chat. So I know a lot of people have dropped in where you're Zooming in from. We'd love to say hello and see where folks are joining us, so feel free to do that. And then also feel free to leave any comments or questions that you have for our presenters throughout the program today, and then we'll read off those questions at the end to engage in that way. We will, unfortunately, my live stream was giving me trouble today, so this is unfortunately not live streamed on YouTube. However, a recording of it will be posted and available to everyone on YouTube. So I'll share a link to that so that you can share it out to colleagues who weren't able to join in the Zoom today. All right, so let's get started with our program. This is our last program of our 2023 Black History Month series. I want to really sincerely thank the Brown School Black History Month Committee, led by the co-chairs Amber Brown and Cynthia Williams, who put together not only this program, but the suite of programs that we had for this month. It was really great, and I hope you all check it out on YouTube. I also want to extend a very special thank you to the sponsor of today's Open Classroom program, which is the Deaconess Foundation. Thank you so much for your sponsorship. And I will invite everyone to visit our Black History Month page, which I'll put in the chat in just a moment. You can learn more about the theme this year. You can see what the rest of the programming was earlier in the month, and you can read about our champions who we've been celebrating. One of those champions is our speaker today, Durrell Smith. So I'm going to introduce him. Durrell is a Brown School alum who returned to our community in 2021 as an adjunct faculty member. We're so lucky to have him. He also teaches and advises and oversees students who are focusing in domestic socioeconomic development concentration through the Office of Field Education. Durrell has a career of over a decade of experience actively combating institutionalized racism and advancing social mobility through the lens of social and economic development. His work is focused on bridging institutional resources and civic leadership in order to mobilize community-based agendas. He brings together education, housing, transportation, and small business development to make wealth more equitable. He's passionate about serving underserved and disenfranchised communities on both the domestic and international scale. And he believes that communities can be healthy and prosperous if societal conditions are transformed toward equity and justice for Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. So please join me in welcoming Durrell Smith here with a few of his colleagues in our community to present anti-oppressive and decolonial approaches to community engagement in St. Louis. Durrell, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for that introduction. I am very excited to be before you today. I was very honored to be chosen to be a part of such a great series of presenters here at the Brown School. This is the title, right? So today we're going to be talking about anti-oppressive and decolonial approaches to community engagement, and specifically to St. Louis. And so, yes, my name is Durrell Smith. I'm a professor here, and I'm excited about today. Our agenda will be, I'll introduce the topic to you. I'll have community members come and discuss best practices. We'll do some overview of anti-oppressive practice, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So just generally, and if we're going to be talking about anti-oppressive or decolonial community engagement, you know, it would be not authentic for me to to do all of the talking, right? Anytime we're talking about doing community engagement, we want to invite everyone to the table. And usually when we talk about community engagement, we're talking about leaders of organizations or institutions or civic engagement. And oftentimes we forget about community members, neighborhood members, people who live and breathe and have to kind of experience the city from a different point. And so today I decided to demonstrate some of the practices that we know work well in communities, and that is to allow the opportunities that we have in our profession to help build capacity and give the mic really to those who are out there doing the work, and also to those who often won't have the opportunity to speak. And so I could have done a presentation for an hour where I detailed all the things that I think are important, but I think it's more valuable to bring people to the table from different parts of St. Louis who are doing some great work, but also who are community members that can speak to these best practices. And so we're going to start with our first presenter that's a part of our panel to discuss, and that's Pastor Jose. He's a good friend of mine that was introduced to me by Professor Jack Kirkland, and he's doing some amazing work and has been doing some amazing work ever since the murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson. The program that he is over is called Adopt a Block. And I would love for him to just introduce himself a little bit more, give us an idea of some of the work that he's done in Ferguson. And then there's a video clip that he wants to show. And so thank you so much, Pastor Jose, for being here with us.
You're welcome, Durrell, all of you. And basically, it's a program that started many years ago, actually. There in Ferguson during the but prior to that, I've been a pastor over at the St. Louis Dream Center, and there we started a program of Adopt a Block, which was birthed by Tommy Barnett in Los Angeles many over 30 years ago, and still going on strong. Adopt a Block is a simple program. Okay, you go and you once a week at least you knock on somebody's door, just check on them. But let me get back to some history first. I am also a chaplain with RRT and with Billy Graham Ministries, as well as Abandoned Purse. But also, I'm also the chief police chaplain in Ferguson, where I train the chaplains there. One of the things I do is travel around the world training chaplains and pastors. But the incident with Michael Brown, usually when we deploy for Billy Graham Ministries, we prior to the Michael Brown incident, we were only going to things of natural disasters, earthquakes, mudslides, things of the natural. This was the first time that we ever deployed for something of civil unrest. And it actually was a training ground for Billy Graham Ministries. Now, I was already based in Ferguson training some pastors there. And I was aware of this problems we have with youth and training and getting involved with youth with the churches. As the aftermath during our deployments as Billy Graham chaplains, we seek the churches, neighborhood churches, to come in and then take over where we left off. And they asked me to do it, and unfortunately, I told them I don't have a church in Ferguson I can refer them to. And they said, well, open one. I said, I'm not starting a church. I'd rather pray about this first. And God put it in my heart to do the Adopt a Block program there in Ferguson. And basically what I did is I trained about 90 or so different churches to come in and take a one-day course on basic chaplaincy. That's what it is. And they were trained by me and a couple other chaplains on how to approach people that have been traumatized. One of the problems that I noticed in Ferguson, people were traumatized. They were hurting. They needed hope. They were in despair. I said, the only way to deal with this situation is to talk to them. They needed an outlet. The police came in, the state came in, and they closed off streets. People couldn't get to work. They couldn't get to school. It was a very traumatizing period many times. And the seniors that were there were very much so, more so, because this was something they had never experienced or never expected. And Ferguson being such a small town, is completely unexpected. So we started this program, and what it undertook was 1 week. Well, whoever volunteered to a church or ministry or organization volunteered to be a part of it would have to sign a contract saying that they were not going to just come and leave. They would have to stay there for a minimum of 6 months. And what it would entailing in that they would go to a person's or adopt one block, and they would go to every house on that block or business, knock on the door, and just to check on the person. The whole trick is you listen, you say nothing else. Okay? You have to listen to people. Keep that in mind for regular community outreach. People are hurting, they're lost, they need help. The best thing to do is just listen. As I train my chaplains, I always tell them, listen to the situation. Before you say anything, pray on it, think about it, and then shut up. Don't say a word, just listen. Okay? These people have heard enough people coming in. And that's another thing that I've talked to many of the students from Washington University about is these people are tired of being under a microscope. Okay? They don't want to be specimens. They don't want to be part of an experiment. They just want to be loved and cared for as people. So treat them like people. Give them that respect. Okay? Listen to them. If you can help them, fine. With the program, if the situation was that that person needed help, they will find out for me. Then people never saw me. People went out every week. I had people of all ages going knocking on doors. I had one old lady who was about 80 years old, knew every person's dog and cat's name in the neighborhood. They got to love her. She was white. They loved her. Okay, they seeked after her. But no one was left out. Everyone was touched by Adopt a Block, and they still are. And the thing about it is just to listen to the people, find out what the needs are, try to take care of those needs. They will bring back the situation to me. Out of that situation, they give an excuse for them to go back the following week with an answer. You don't give an answer right away, even if you have it. You go back next week with the answer. That gives you another opportunity. This goes and establish a relationship with the people. And that's what the most important thing is, establishing that relationship. Because once you go back 2 or 3 times, they realize that you do care and you're there for real. They're so used to people coming in and hitting them once and then leaving. People are tired of that. If you're going to help somebody, help them. And it's a long-term relationship. It's not short-term. If you can't do it, don't even bother to get started. Because they're tired of being hurt. They're tired of being used. And from this program, we not only help a lot of the residents and a lot of the seniors, we help youth programs. We develop programs for the homeless, okay? Warming centers for the homeless. People forget about them, but they had no place to go. We develop job programs. We have to get people's jobs. I mean, one of the big problems we had in the beginning after Michael Brown's period was people couldn't get jobs because they got lost to jobs because they couldn't get out of buildings and everything else. So we're able to, again, network with other organizations, help each other. Don't try to create a new wheel. There's enough wheels out there. Try to put those wheels together and go in the same direction. Okay, you've got organizations out there that specialize in areas that you don't. Why start it new? So we were able to work with some other organizations that could find jobs and find jobs for people that had a record. That's one of the biggest problems. People with records could not find jobs. So we're able to help them with that. People ask us for prayer for finding a job. A couple of years later, we went back and said, what do you need? Said, we have jobs. Thank you. Now we need is additional aid with something else. We have one of the local elementary schools, a private school, says, we got scholarships for your kids. Okay. During the pandemic, we opened up a center for tutoring for the children. Okay, because that was a problem there. Our kids were being held back. There's things that you can do that people have the needs. It got to the point that we were feeding. Well, we had a feeding program. We were giving away and distributing over 300 meals every Saturday in the neighborhood. And those that couldn't come pick it up, we had it delivered with another ministry. We joined with another ministry, partner with people. They're out there, partner with each other, talk to each other, communicate, help each other. Because together you will be able to reach more masses than you can by yourself. So partnering is very important. Communication is the key. And again, patience. Okay. People are hurting out there. And I'm not talking about just the Michael Brown era. I'm talking about also with economics nowadays. People are hurting. Kids kids are killing kids. I mean, who thought that you can go into universities now and there'll be shootings, students being killed, teachers. People are scared. You have to bring them back together. There's a reason why all these things are happening. I don't have the time, unfortunately, to go into or dwell on all these subjects. I wish I could, but I can't. I got to go catch a plane back home. But these things are available. Durrell will be talking, and I will be doing some programs together for the neighborhood. And hopefully some of these things can be implemented and in place soon so they can all participate. I've had many of the students from the school, WashU, come over, and they love it. Every time they come over, they say, man, this is great. We had a barbecue once a week for family barbecue, once a month, I'm sorry. And they have all the families come over and they interact with each other, and the neighborhood concept has been lost. Why did I know this? Well, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I'm from New York. I was in all the best neighborhoods, South Bronx, Brooklyn. You name the neighborhood in the Bronx, in New York, that's bad, we've done ministry in there, okay? Dr. Block was started in Charlotte, ministry headquarters over there. One of the worst neighborhoods in that area. Dr. Block was started. In a year's time, there was no crime in that area, very minimal crime. Why? Because people started talking to each other again. Neighbors with neighbors. Another thing is, implement your neighborhood, your neighbors talk with each other. People driving to their homes nowadays, they drive into the driveway, they go into the back door, they don't see their neighbors anymore. We got air conditioning. People don't want to be out in the heat talking like they used to in the stoops. People don't want, they have cable now, they don't want to be outside talking, converted, having a conversation with the neighbor, how the day was, whatever. They just want to get in and get out. They don't want to know anything. You got cameras now with whatever they call it on your doorsteps, so you don't have to go out to see who's out the door. You look at it on your phone. Communication is dying. We had to build it up again. Okay.
Yeah.
We have to have that once face-to-face conversation with people.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pastor Jose. I don't mean to cut you off. We have a couple other people that have to go. And I just want to highlight some of the things that you're saying that I think are very valuable. Adopt a Block is not necessarily a very highly funded program, but it's really a program that you go out and you meet people, you find out the needs of the community, and you try to find out what's already available, and then provide avenues for those resources to be given to the community. I think it's a great program, and I wanted Pastor Jose to talk about that, because sometimes what organizations do, whether they're heavily funded or institutions that are heavily funded, they often don't talk to each other, and also I think that there's a gap in this expectation that people are want money. But really what I've learned from Pastor Jose and different community members is they're looking for a community. They're looking to build back those bare necessities of a community, of just being able to talk to one another, to spend time with one another, to have these barbecues. Where are my kids going to go after school? So there was an after school program that was started simply to meet a need. And so thank you so much, Pastor Jose, for sharing with us. We're gonna move on to the next person. I don't think we have time for the clip that we had for you, but at the end of the questions, we'll post the clip if anyone wants to watch it. Thank you so much for your time.
You. God bless you, and I'll see you back in St. Louis.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. Okay, and so the next person that we have is someone who's born and raised St. Louis. She's a colleague of mine, someone that I went to school with here at the Brown School, but she's a phenomenal mother, a phenomenal film director, and film producer. She is well known in St. Louis for curating a film called the Kinlock Doc. And so this is Alana Flowers. Take it away.
Hello, happy Wednesday. Thank you, Durrell, for my intro. You are an amazing colleague as well. Thank you all for having me today. Wow. I don't know why I always get nervous with conversations like this. It's just me shooting the breeze like any other time that I have this conversation. But as Durrell mentioned, I attended the Brown School from 2015 to 2017. I'm also born and raised all my life in the city of St. Louis. I currently reside in the city of Dallas. I've been here for about 3 years, but I frequent back home a lot to see my parents and to see my nieces and my nephews back home. But going to a little more detail, if you haven't had the opportunity to watch the Kinloch doc, essentially it is about a community which was the city of Missouri's first Black city that was incorporated in the state. It was one of the largest all Black communities in the country during its prime, but that's also an area that my family is from. My grandfather was born in Covington, Tennessee, and he migrated to Kinloch before going off to war. And then he met my grandmother and they had several children here. So it's about how an entity like a Lambert Airport, the airport that is directly adjacent to the community, and essentially what happened to the city of Kinloch from being next to that airport, and directly what happened to a community like, or a family like mine and dozens of other families like mine that was impacted by being next to that. But as a filmmaker, what got me into wanting to tell this story, because again, everything that happened to the city of Kinloch happened before my time. You know, I just go by hearsay, but I wanted to know, like, is it more than just an airport coming in and dismantling a community? Like, in a nutshell, that's just one sentence, but essentially what happened, what is the impact 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the line? Could anything have been done, and how can we prevent this from happening again? So one of the things that yes.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Can we show the clip really quick?
Oh yeah, I thought that's what we was doing in the beginning, but go ahead and show the clip.
Let's show the clip for those. Yeah.
My relationship to Kinloch, I'm a descendant. That is where my family is from. All of this, like, was Kinloch. So where these warehouses are, these are where homes once were. My grandpa migrated up here from Tennessee and met my grandmother here. And he had kids. They raised their kids, and so they were bought out by Lambert Airport in the late 80s, like hundreds of other Black families in Kinloch, and then they ended up moving to Ferguson. So unfortunately, I never got an opportunity to see the house in Kinloch. I wasn't born until after they already moved, but for me, I just really wanted to learn more about, you know, where my family was from. I wanted to learn more about my dad's upbringing, capturing his story while he's still here to tell it, but also I just want to learn more about the area that who raised me. So before Kinloch was incorporated in 1948, Kinloch was actually white. It was a commuter suburb, and it was really, really big, and Blacks would come over here to work either as servants or some menial labor work, and it wasn't incorporated until 1948. So technically, it being the first Black city, when you're official, when you're on the books, that was by Black people. And now this is Holy Angels Church. The plaques on the ground are plaques of like notable people from Kinloch. So Maxine Waters has one, Jennifer Lewis has one, Dick Gregory has one. The displacement of Black people, Black families, and Black communities have gone on for decades throughout this country. This is for the descendants of Rosewood, Florida. This is for the descendants of Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is for the descendants of Seneca Village in New York, now known as Central Park. This is for Kinloch. Thank you for sharing that. I always get a little emotional every time I watch that because I always get back down to my why of how I got started. But yeah, going back into that, I, as a student at the Brown School, under Professor Jack Kirkland's mentorship and leadership, shout out to him because he was an amazing mentor in getting this, helping me getting this story told and just kind of getting to the grit of like my why and why I wanted to do this. But on a personal note, learn more about my family, learn more about why we migrated to the city of St. Louis and specifically Kinloch. But on a larger scale, like Kinloch is one of many Black communities that have been dismantled for whatever reason, and I wanted to understand why. But also providing a platform for people, because again, people still live in Kinloch. They have their own voice. They don't need me to be a voice for them. So I tell people all the time, I'm just a vessel. Like I never lived there. I don't have any relationship to living there. Like my bloodline is from there. And so I make that known every time I have these conversations because, you know, as the saying goes, you can take the people out of Kinloch, but you can't take the Kinloch out of people. And so that was the biggest thing for me and wanted to tell this story is to use it as a platform for Kinlochians and their pride that they still wear very visibly, right? And so doing this film, and one of the first things that I did was connected with my father, of course, but having him connect with people that he grew up with, you know, members of my family that are still alive. And mind you, I said I'm a student at the Brown School, but I didn't use my identity as a WashU student when deciding to take on this endeavor. I don't think it's a surprise to many about WashU's relationship with the greater region at large, especially all Black communities. So I did not want to lead with that. I wanted to lead with, I'm a St. Louisan, and I'm interested in learning more about this community. And so outside of just being a filmmaker, one of the biggest things that helped make this film come true was trust building. Oftentimes people get to, you know, you're in school to get your social work degree, but you're making this film, you know, what all did it take? 90% of this is trust building. I can go on YouTube and learn how to hold a camera. I can learn how to interview people, but having empathy and having compassion and building trust with community members, especially as I'm coming in as somebody of the media. You don't have to do it right now, but at some point when you have a downtime, like Google the city of Kinloch and look at all the links, look at all the clips, look at all the news links, all the articles. About 90% of them are negative. And I did not want to be a part of that. And so Kinloch's relationship with the media is disenchanted. And there's a reason for that, right? Because of all of the things that have been put in the media about the community. And so I had work to do. Like I would never just go into that community with a camera in hand. It's gonna take some work. And I was willing to put in that work and people honored that. And like Pastor Jose said in his conversation previously about, you know, if you're wanting to do this work, it's not a one and done. I knew from the beginning, I didn't want to just come and make this film and go on about my day. Like I'm invested, I want to connect with the people, I want to do more things. And so another thing that I did, I connected with the Kinloch Reunion Committee and also the Ladies of Kinloch. So there are community members, well, people who don't live in the community anymore that used to live there that connect socially on their own once a month. And so they're deep in their, you know, 70s and 80s. And I met with them and they meet at the Cracker Barrel the first Monday of every month. And I just popped in and I became an honorary granddaughter throughout this process, y'all. Like they fed me. I was just like, when they feed you, that's how you know you in. And then another thing that I did was connected with the Kinloch Reunion Committee. So throughout my research, I learned that they used to have festivals in the park to celebrate the city of Kinloch's incorporation. And of course, just due to time and chaos that happened in the community, they stopped doing it. And so I learned that in 2018, I'm like, this is a 70th anniversary, like we got to do something. And I connected with the Kinloch Reunion Committee. Most of those members live in a nursing home. Again, they are deep in their 70s and 80s. And so I went to them, and that's another thing. You got to go into their spaces. You got to go where they frequent, where they're most comfortable, right? This not me asking y'all to come to me. And so I met with them once a week and we planned the Kinloch Forever weekend. I used my tools and my resources. I learned about event planning. I learned about a sponsorship place. I didn't know none of this, y'all, but just because my passion and my commitment to celebrating this city and celebrating this community beyond a film, and we put together a very successful event. And I'm still in touch with all of them. Even though I've been in Dallas for 3 years, I stay connected with them. I reach out to them to see how they're doing. When I do go back home, I visit them, pray with them. And the best part about it, a lot of those people knew like the elders in my family who were no longer here. And so it gave me an opportunity to connect with my grandparents who are deceased because they knew them in a different light than I did. And it was a way for me to get connected with them and process my own grief as well. And so it was cyclical, right? And so I was able to provide my, gifts and talents and resources and my ministry to a lot of these individuals, and they were able to stay in their zone of genius and help me as well. But to wrap this up, like a lot of trust building, y'all, like a lot of trust has been broken within marginalized communities, and rightfully so. And so going in with my intent, another thing really quick. So on a personal note, so I'm in therapy, and I was telling my therapist that my parents are retired, and, I just want them to travel, and I want them to, just go do things, like they deserve it. And my therapist was like, well, how do you know that's what they want? I know you want that for them, but how do you know that's what they want? And that brought me back to how I got started in making this film. Like, you can drive through Kinloch and you can see the disarray, and you can see the trash, and you can see all of these things, and we can get on our high horses like, I want to help. How do you know what they want? Right. And so that's because that's what you want for them. So keeping that in mind when you're approaching these communities, community members, when you drive through these communities and you see, you see conditions in which you personally probably would not want to live, but making sure you are very clear with your intentions. How do you know what they want? So before you go into these spaces saying, I want to help, did you ask them what they want help with, what they need help with? And so that's what I want to close with, is just, purifying your intentions when it comes to helping people, because it is very easy to go in with the savior complex. And that is the last thing that we want to do. So I know I was all over the place, Durrell. You know how I get when I get in these conversations.
No, it's okay. I really appreciate I really appreciate your perspective and your passion. In the film, there was a question, I know we're going to get to the end, but how can people access the entire Kinloch doc?
I need to put it out. Thank y'all for holding my feet to the fire. I am going to put it out.
The phenomenal film is something that everyone should see. Thank you so much, Alana, for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I have another member of our panel who I would love to give us some perspective on St. Louis and community engagement. This is also a dear friend of mine, and she's amazing. She's done some tremendous work in community in St. Louis. She's from St. Louis, born and bred. She currently does, several different things, but she's a mother and she's a wife, and she's a proud member of the St. Louis community. What I can appreciate about Kiara is that every time I talk to her, I feel like the narrative about what I understand about St. Louis changes, right? My understanding, the information, just the lived experience is often different from what you would read in a research paper or what you would read in an article, what you see on TV. The lived experience of people is quite different. And so connecting with someone who's lived here, who's been here, is so vital and important. She's also a very successful businesswoman. So she has a real estate company, she has a trucking company, and she's not playing with any of us. I would love to hear from you, Kiara. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, so happy Wednesday, everybody. Thank you guys for joining. Can you hear me, Durrell? Okay, good. I had a slide with a few terms that I wanted to share just to start off. A few terms that extremely sort of jump out at me in my experience. Alana mentioned this cyclical sort of process and journey that we tend to go through, which is a huge blessing. There's some tokens of appreciation to draw from that experience. So I'm going to share a few terms, and I want you guys to sort of let these terms ponder, resonate, as I share a little bit of my experience and in working with community engagement. So trauma awareness, place space, savior mentality, George Floyd, and for me at that same time, becoming a first-time mommy, capacity building, phasing out, and being asked, what is it that you do? And my answer is always, whatever it takes. So I just want you guys to keep some of those terms in mind as I share a little bit about my process. The anti-oppressive actions to community engagement here in St. Louis. Alana mentioned this, Durrell, Pastor. So these terms, equity, justice, trust building, listen, and nobody needs a savior, nobody. So point blank, period, it's not necessary, no one needs a savior. And for me as a social worker, which I use that background as a framework to how I approach capacity building, number one is recognizing the current value and potential in Black communities. I'm going to say Black communities in our conversation because I am a Black woman. I work and care compassionately, deeply about Black communities. So I just wanted to lay it out. But then the lack of equity also in these communities. So Durrell, I'm sorry, not Pastor, Mr. Smith, he spoke about justice and equity earlier. It's also important for me to state that many of us social workers, we get accepted to the Brown School of Social Work, which I know I did, unconsciously entering the field of community engagement to solve a problem or an issue. Thanks to my experience at the Brown School, specifically Professor Jack Kirkland, I can definitely say that my perspective has changed since starting and actually getting into the field. For example, I'm from St. Louis. I grew up in the Blue Myers. Then my mother and my siblings and I, we live further south from there. But I was always told not to go on the east side. And for most of us in the professional context, we refer to it as East St. Louis. But we was always told not to cross the bridge, don't go on the east side, just don't go there. But Professor Kirkland provided an experience, a perspective that helped to shape my own sort of work in recognizing the value, removing fear, and building capacity. And so just to dive into a little bit of what that work has looked like for me, is essentially backing myself out of a role and responsibility. So there shouldn't be a space for us years later down the line when we go into someone else's community, even if it's your own. Our lived experiences, our trauma, our commitment to the work, honestly, we should be backing ourselves out of a responsibility at some point. Because for me, it's mostly been about identifying ways to enhance and support the value that's already within the community. Professionally, for me, my commitment lies within building capacity. I'm currently operating a trucking and transportation company and also real estate. So with the real estate, we get to connect people to communities and make sure they're aware of their choices to get involved. When do you contact your other person? You've got an issue with the school system, who do you contact? The street lights ain't working, who do you contact? But building capacity and starting with people, and it's literally connecting people to communities. So that's me when it comes to real estate. Personally, someone who recognizes my own trauma, its impact, so the trauma of my impact, nurturing those within my immediate circle. So my husband, my baby, close relatives who accept my support. And I have a Black son. So if I decide to tune into the media, most of the times what's highlighted on the news would be a Black male. Either he's a victim or he's a suspect, mostly of a crime. So packaging all of that lived experience and then saying, hey, I'm really passionate about community engagement, but recognizing that I'm not here to be a savior. And no one needs a savior. I don't need a savior, never needed a savior, right? But for me, it's all about recognizing the value that's within the communities that we're actually associated with, grounding yourself and seeking solutions, capacity, and again, connectivity. I can't stress that more enough. In 2016, I committed a lot of my time to a nonprofit housing ministry, which is Cornerstone in the mighty West End, which isn't far from Washington. You guys should definitely take a tour of the community. I live there now. I live here now. And this organization, after 44 years, I was the first Black executive director to lead the organization and also possess a master's of social work. So what was very interesting is that this organization has been around for 44 years, primarily focused on providing affordable housing, extremely low rent to Black people on the West Side, in the West End. We got all of these terms for different communities now, in the West End. And so my charge that I knew God had given me was to be there for a period, was to help build the organization's capacity, and then also shed light to opportunities around the community and ways that the organization can become sort of like a staple point of contact for what was happening, because we knew when it came to real estate, when it came to property values, development, the proximity to Washington University, that some things were going to take place in this neighborhood. So we didn't have a stable organization, a community development organization, which is a place-based CDC. So Cornerstone eventually became that. So some of that work was also about having one-on-one conversations with residents who wanted to be leaders in the community and connecting them to resources so that they can become resident leaders. It was all about building the capacity from the inside of the organization to surrounding leaders and residents in the neighborhood. And then from there, our board, it's interesting when we say we want to do community engagement work, but most of the leaders, don't look like you. That doesn't provide hope. And so one of the things we changed during that time was actually diversifying racially our board and consisting of Black people that lived in this neighborhood, in the West End neighborhood. But I promise you, the work that was able to be done was almost irreplaceable in the sense that it provided hope. And a lot of times when you lose hope, you don't have a desire to go out and try to, do something about it, or even being able to recognize the situation that you're in. And so now in 2023, we have this amazing community where residents have been championed, their goals, their ideas for their neighborhood have been written down, will be adopted by the city of St. Louis, and additional resources have come from that opportunity. Resources such as a random grant that'll happen on February the 28th, actually, it's $10,000 if you lived in the West End neighborhood prior to all of the gentrification, which is for this neighborhood was around 2015. And it's the purpose of that is to build equity in your home. You can invest in your home or even your own personal business or your finances. And it's specifically for Black homeowners in the West End neighborhood. We've had a number of institutions reach out and, say, hey, I'll commit to helping you guys actually execute your neighborhood plan that you did. Residents did this work. But if I were to sum up everything that I wanted to share with you guys today, it's definitely continue, especially any students, continue to invest in yourself so that you become or even positioned to give to others and ultimately provide support in the capacity that best suits your skills and experience. But taking care of yourself. America obviously has a problem. I've been to Jamaica a couple of times, and my experience there was all about class. It was a classism thing. Here in America, it's skin color. And I genuinely don't believe that it's just Black and white. I genuinely believe there's a culprit, which is Satan. I'm just saying, I'm a Christian, and a bunch of crap happened, but we were all created equally. And understanding that when it comes to employing resources that can make things equitable, the very baseline of it all is recognizing that we were all created equally. And some bullshit went down. In order to move forward together as a collective, understanding that there is value in each of the Black communities. Again, I'm speaking on Black communities. Each of the Black communities that exist that we may want to associate ourselves with and build upon community engagement. We got to recognize that there's value that already exists. We can't go in thinking that we know everything or we can charter what should happen next in your community. So I wanted to end there, unless Mr. Smith had any specific questions. Again, building capacity.
Yeah.
Building capacity.
I think you highlighted a great deal of community engagement practices. One thing I wanted you to speak a little bit more about is the home association in the West End. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you did with that?
Absolutely. So our neighborhood association, which is different from the nonprofit organization work that I did in the West End. So West End Neighborhood Association is it's another staple community body of residents that get together that focus on the safety and sharing the safety of the West End community, and also share information amongst residents. But most importantly, it's only a body of residents. And something that we noticed in attending meetings is that only homeowners would attend, no renters. A lot of times renters are, very, it's very fluid. You come and you go, but making sure that everyone had and also knew but there was a space for them there to actually share what they wanted their community to look like also. So in the West End neighborhood now, we have, and Durrell did speak a little bit about this with Cornerstone. What we have now is an opportunity where we're connecting with neighborhoods that are further north and south, and ultimately saying what we have in our community, we want that to be available for other folks as well. So let's share some of these best practices that we're actually going to now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time to be here with us. Amber, if we can go back to the slides, I will take the next 10 minutes to kind of discuss some of the anti-oppressive practices that I found to be effective. Thank you for all the community members who have given voice to, some of the things that they find valuable in community engagement. This information I'm going to present to you right now comes from Northeastern University, the social lab, and they really identified for me some of the key practices that institution or an organization can employ when they're thinking about doing community engagement. I want to preface this by saying really quickly that these communities have been oppressed, right? Both institutionally, through policy, redlining, through all of these different structures for long-standing periods of time. And so sometimes some of the things that we see, we don't often know what we're looking at. But it's definitely a relationship between some things that have happened to the community. And so there's some apprehension for community members to be willing to participate with institutions like Washington University or some of these other organizations that may want to come in and say, hey, we want to help now. And help can look very differently. And so here are a list of some of these practices that I wanted to briefly go over. Number one is we want to honor those communities' autonomy and right to self-determine. And that's been brought out by many of the speakers already, which is we don't want to presume that we know what the solution should be. We want to be able to sit, listen, and hear from community members about what they value, what they care about. Oftentimes in academia, because we do a lot of research and studying, and we spend a lot of time gaining information, from academia per se, that sometimes we think we have, we've come up with some type of solution, or that work is not already being done in the community. And I want to tell you that work is already being done and has been done for decades, but there may be barriers to success that we can look at. So number one, we just want to honor. We want to honor the autonomy and the right to self-determine for communities. They know what they want. They know what they need. We want to respect communities. We want to respect them by learning their history, learning their culture, listening to their lived experiences. Right? They are the experts on their experience, on their pain, and on their solutions. We are not experts. I mean, I know I'm from the Brown School of Social Work. I know I'm a professor, but I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in the community. And the various communities are very nuanced. They're very different. If you go to Soulard versus the West End, if you go to South City versus North City, if you go to Kinloch versus East St. Louis, very different lived experiences. Right. And so we want to respect that by listening. We recognize the limits of our lived experience. It's very important that we recognize that we're not experts and that we need perspective. And that can only come from the community themselves, not from literature, not from articles, but from the voices of those in the community. We reflect on our social identities, right? I'm a Black man. And so how do I engage, or how will I be received by community members as a Black male? If I was a white woman, if I were, a different type of social identity, how does that impact trust? How does that impact building rapport? What's my position as a professor? What is my position? And what am I accountable for in that position? And lastly, one of the most important factors is power. Right? What power do I have? Oftentimes, institutions and organizations, because they have power, they don't always have to discuss with the community or collaborate with the community. They can just come in and do what they want. And because that has happened so many times, communities don't trust institutions and organizations. And so in order to pivot that or shift that, we really have to reflect on, I do have power and I do have positionality. And how do I use that power and positionality to help build capacity, like Ms. Anderson said. And then here we go, building. We build authentic, mutual, beneficial relationships, mutually beneficial. So obviously, when an institution like Washington University or the Brown School of Social Work, when we come in, we're getting data, we're getting information that we're going to use to write papers to kind of build our reputation and different things. But what does the community get out of those activities? How can we make sure whenever we do a program or an initiative that there is some type of benefit for the community, right? And then lastly, patience and humility. If we're going to come in, we need to be patient with the people, and we need to be humble about our approach. If we can go to the next slide, and I know I'm going really fast. Yes, and so we also want to prioritize that patience. We want to make sure that if we're going to say we're coming in, we're starting this relationship, we want to give as much information as possible. We want to be as honest and transparent about what we want to do. And then we also want to be patient with community members about them wanting to come on board and partner with us. Sometimes, community members just don't want to. They've experienced a lot of empty promises. And so when an organization comes in and has a good intent, it doesn't mean you're going to be received. And that takes time. Like any relationship, it takes time to build that trust. And I gave a keynote speech recently at a conference where I said, visibility is credibility. So if we're not showing up in spaces such as churches, such as council meetings, and a variety of places that people already find themselves engaging, these homeowners associations, how do we become more visible and more consistent with that visibility so that people know who we are, know us by name, and can begin to trust us with time. And then prioritizing joy. Oftentimes when we look at these communities, we often think it's all negative and we have a deficit perspective. But there's so much joy, there's so much singing, there's so much activity, there's so much neighborhood camaraderie in these neighborhoods that can be highlighted and can be helped to continue to build. We want to manage our resources equitably. I'll leave that where it stays, right? So for every organization or institution, it looks different, but we want to keep that in mind. Is this equitable? We want to rethink our relationships with time and urgency. So in a capitalistic world, right, in a white supremacy framework, time is money. Time is money. And unfortunately, a lot of nonprofit organizations don't have a lot of that money. And so they don't have a lot of that time. Same with institutions. And so we have to figure out how we want to rethink how we approach building relationships with the community and not using time and urgency as something that's negative, but yeah, this is going to take us some time and we want to be patient with that process. We also want to do something I think is one of the most important is that's hold ourselves accountable to those values and practices that we said we wanted to do in that relationship. And so here it talks about holding ourselves accountable to the values and practices of anti-oppressive community engagement in our relationships with students and in our classrooms. It's really interesting. So sometimes we find ourselves wanting to do these great initiatives and this great work, but a lot of that work externally can start internally, right? How do we treat the people within our organization now? How do we treat the members of the community that work with us? How do we treat the people we consider custodians or bus drivers or people who clean the tables? How do we treat just the people we work with, our secretaries, not just people in high positions that we kind of have to honor, but how do we engage with the relationships of the people we work with currently? Can students from the Brown School say, hey, this environment has been edifying for me? My experiences with these professors has really helped me to grow as a person. It makes me feel comfortable and safe. Is that true? And if it isn't, not saying that it isn't, but if it isn't, how do we move closer to that goal? Can we move to the next slide, please? So we've said a lot. And I was so grateful that these individuals, and there's so many other individuals that I wish we had time. We only had an hour, but I wish we had more time to bring so many people who are doing this work, who have been very successful at doing this work. I honor them, and I honor the people here in St. Louis by allowing them to have the mic and have the voice to share what really is needed in the community. I'm hoping that this was edifying. I think we have 2 minutes for questions, Amber. So if you want to kind of give that space, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Durrell. Thank you, Kiara. Thank you, Alana, for being here today, and also Pastor Jose, who unfortunately had to step out a little earlier today. The only question I had, actually 2 questions. One, will this slide deck be available in PDF form?
Yes. Of course.
And the other was a comment during during Pastor Jose's portion of this session, where they were wondering why an outside source was coming in to help in Ferguson. Were there any? Does anyone that's still left on the calls know if there were ways to partner with local churches and other things that were within the Ferguson area?
I think I have conversations with Pastor Jose, and I think what he was saying was that there was no church per se that was doing this work. And so he had to really start to bring collaboration between the churches to do the work together. I don't think he would dare say that no one's doing anything, but doing it in such a way that it was collaborative and unified, a movement for Ferguson. So he just played the part of bringing people together so that the work could be more impactful.
And it looks like we have one more question that I might be able to get to. So how do you bring awareness of all of this to those in positions of power who may view our communities as a savior lens or with a savior lens?
Yeah. One of the things that I will say, I'll say that even doing this presentation in the way that I decided to do it, felt like I was taking a risk, right? And because we don't often have this kind of way of doing things, and so really taking in the theme of resistance against oppression, we do have to talk about the issue of people in power and whether it's an organization, whether it's at your place of work, courage. I will tell you that I'm a student of Professor Kirkland, and one of the themes that he talks about a lot is once you start to learn a lot of this information and you want to help the community or you want to partner with the community, that it's going to take some courage in speaking to power and having some of those very needed conversations. It takes courage. And so building yourself up by having a community, a village that you're working with, people that can hold you accountable to the work, that can also give you advice and wisdom. Seeking counsel is something that I think I do all the time. But I think Ms. Anderson also has something that she wants to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question because it gets into how do we take this from a conversation to making things very practical. And so we have in the community engagement world, we have this concept of a community benefits agreement. And so I literally just thought about this as that question was asked, and it's great. It's a great opportunity for Washington University because we are leaders in in a number of regards. And so what if Washington University sort of led this initiative to where there was if you pull back up your slides, Durrell, what I'm considering here is a equity analysis tool that sort of most people in power or institutions, in order to become partners, you need to stamp of approval. Like, where do you guys rank when it comes to this equity analysis? And I think the analysis could be based on exactly what you just presented to us today. How are you honoring people? How are you, what does your listening process look like? But everything that you just shared on your slides today, I think that's something that can be a standard, that should become a standard in practice for most of our institutions and grant providers and community engaged, even boards. If you want to receive this grant, where do you fall in here? And what would the custodian say? How would he rank you? we don't want to talk to the board today. Let me talk to the custodians if this is real. I think Washington University could lead that initiative because of our great platform.
Thank you so much. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time today, and I want to also give another thank you and shout out to all of our guests today. Yes, this is our closing presentation for Black History Month, but it's never the end of Black History Month and celebrations. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to kick it back over to Sarah to close us out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you, Durrell, for the presentation today. And thank you for modeling what it looks like to share space, power, voice with the three other presenters doing this really good work today. I will be posting the recording of this on YouTube. Usually it takes me a couple of days. And then we'll also post thank you, Durrell, for letting us post your slides as well. So I put links in the chat to where you can find those things. Again, give me a couple days to do that. We have another open classroom program coming up tomorrow, and you can register for that link in the chat. And yeah, a very happy Black History Month to everybody, but we know that Black history is American history and should be learned and celebrated all year long. Please continue to do so. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.